It's time to kick off the offseason right here on the Commanders Report because yesterday the Washington Commanders finished out their 2025 regular season by defeating the Philadelphia Eagles by a final score of 24-17, finishing with a record of 5-12 as we approach a huge 2026 offseason here in Washington. Now, before we get into today's content, we got a bunch of great offseason content coming your way here over the next several weeks as we approach NFL free agency. We got cut candidates, trade candidates. We're going to have a perfect offseason plan for you guys here in a couple of weeks. We got weekly mock drafts on this channel now that we know what the Commanders' official draft slot is. More on that later. And then also offseason breaking news. Every time Adam Peters makes a move, a trade, a signing, make a draft pick, doesn't matter. If we have breaking news here on the Commanders Report, we are going to get it to you guys as soon as we possibly can. And listen, man, there's going to be a lot of turnover on this roster this year. There's going to be a lot of news to report on here during this. It's going to be a very busy offseason. If you guys want the latest when it comes to the Washington Commanders this offseason, you guys want the best coverage surrounding this football team in 2026, make sure you guys click that subscribe button if you haven't already. But before we turn our attention to 2026, let's wrap up 2025 with a synopsis of yesterday's win versus the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, obviously, the Eagles were not playing their starters. Tanner McKee was getting the start, and, the defense actually played pretty well. Obviously, you're not playing against the starters, but, Devontae Smith was playing in this game as the number one receiving option. Tank Bigsby, somebody that does get, playing time with them, even when they are playing their full starters, but listen, man, it just wasn't, a fair fight necessarily. The Eagles were playing their backups. The Commanders were playing their starters. But then again, the Commanders were missing a lot of their starters because of injury. I mean, over half of the team's week one starters were injured for this football game. So, it was kind of a fair fight in this one, and the Commanders ended up pulling out the victory. I don't think either team really had a great day necessarily. There were some mistakes made by both sides. Josh Johnson had a fumble and an interception in this game. I didn't think he played terrific, but it was good enough to get the victory, and that means that the Washington Commanders have officially locked themselves into the 7th overall draft slot for the 2026 NFL Draft being held in Pittsburgh this spring, so they will officially draft 7th. Now, here's what kind of sucks about winning yesterday, and by the way, I was cheering for the Commanders to win yesterday. I'm happy they were able to start 2026 off with a win and finish out their 2025 season with a little bit of positivity heading into this offseason. However, if you would have lost yesterday, you would have leapfrogged multiple teams that won in their season finale, and you would have been picking 4th, all right? So you would have had really your pick of the litter in terms of the top positional prospects that are available to you in the 2026 NFL Draft, and you probably could have got even just a little bit more in a potential trade down situation because there's teams that are going to be potentially looking to trade up to get their player of choice. Now, I don't think it really matters that much. I still think every opportunity to trade down and get a decent draft haul with picks and et cetera, or just taking a player that you love at number 7, all those options are still on the table for Adam Peters. And the reality of the situation is, first two teams, the Raiders and the Jets, almost certainly going to take quarterbacks. Fernando Mendoza, Dante Moore. We'll see what the order is between those two quarterbacks, but I'm guessing those will be the first two picks of the draft. And, there's going to be maybe another team in there that drafts another quarterback, depending on Ty Simpson or, maybe Trinidad Chambliss. Who knows? We'll see what ends up, how the quarterback market in the draft kind of shakes out this year. But the Commanders should still be able to get a really good player if they want to take a player at number 7, but honestly, I think that I've been saying this for a while, guys. I think Adam Peters is very likely to trade down in round 1 because you can trade down, get a couple more picks, still get a really good player in round 1. But right now, this is a team that, is going to have a lot of turnover this year. There's a lot of veterans that are going to be leaving this team, and you only have 6 draft picks, and only 2 of those are in the first 4 rounds. So you're going to want to get some more draft capital, in my opinion. Trade down a couple spots if there's a team that wants to go get, the player of their choosing at number 7, you can get a couple draft picks in the middle rounds in exchange. That's certainly something that I would consider if I'm Adam Peters and the Washington Commanders. And then when you do make picks in these early rounds, in the middle rounds, you got to make sure you hit on these players. And obviously that round 1 selection will be huge because you're going to be asking that player to pretty much become a starter for this team right away, at least in my opinion. Now predict it for me down there in the comment section. Will Washington stay put or trade down in round 1 of the NFL Draft this year? Type S if you think they stay put at number 7, or type T if you think they trade up? Let me know what you guys think. Or trade down, I should say. Let me know what you guys think down there in the comment section for today's pinned question. Just a second here, I'm going to tell you about our sponsor today at Prize Picks. Well, I'll tell you about Prize Picks. Let me know if you think the Commanders stay put or trade down. Now let's have a word from our sponsor today at Prize Picks, and it is officially the new year here, guys. And in my opinion, this is the best time of the year to be a sports fan. Bowl games, playoff games, and professional football and collegiate football for that matter. Basketball and hockey season are now in full swing as well. It's all happening all at once, and it's all happening right now. And while all that action is going on, there's one place where it feels so good to be right, and that's Prize Picks. Prize Picks is super simple to play. Just pick more than or less than at least 2-player stat projections. If you get your picks right, you could cash in. My favorite feature about Prize Picks, though, is how you play is up to you guys. If you want a little bit more flexibility, you can choose the flex play, where you can get paid even if one of your picks misses. And if you're feeling particularly strong about your lineup and want a bigger payout, you can go for the power play. No matter how you play, though, Prize Picks is a great way to put your takes to the test and make some money. That is, if you know ball. You guys can take a look here at my Prize Picks projection for Monday Night Football on Wild Card Weekend here this weekend between the Texans and Steelers. I'm taking the less on C.J. Stroud passing yards, the more on receptions for Kenny Gainwell, and I'm taking the more on receiving yards for Steelers tight end Pat Freiermuth. You guys can download the Prize Picks app today. Use code CLNS. Get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, it's good to be right. Now some Week 18 takeaways here before we move on to some other topics here. I want to congratulate Bobby Wagner on being the third player in NFL history to get to 2,000 career tackles. Now, you guys know, I don't think Bobby Wagner's had a particularly good season this year. I think it is probably time for Bobby to hang up the cleats, but I understand why the Commanders, kept him in all season long. It was to get to this milestone because this is a very rare air that Bobby Wagner has gotten to here, where he's now the third player in NFL history to get to 2,000 career tackles. He joins Ray Lewis and London Fletcher on the list of NFL players that have reached this milestone. So a big congratulations to Bobby Wagner. He's got an incredible career, an incredible resume, one of the greatest linebackers to ever play the game. And unfortunately, he started to wane a little bit here in Washington. But hey, Father Time is undefeated. And I do think it's time for Bobby to call it a career. If he comes back for another season, he will almost certainly be the NFL's tackle leader for a career, but I just don't see any way where Bobby is a player that helps the Commanders win in 2026. So I think it is time to move on for both sides here. Congratulate Bobby on getting to that on that milestone and getting into that really great company of 2,000 career tackle players. And also, by the way, London Fletcher, the guy that's second on this list, isn't in the Hall of Fame. So let's make that happen, by the way. NFL. Let's put London Fletcher in the freaking Hall of Fame. He deserves it. All-time great player in my opinion, especially for this franchise, and I'm looking forward to hopefully seeing him in Canton one day. Speaking of guys that are going to be in Canton one day, Von Miller moving up the ranks in terms of the all-time sack leaderboard in NFL history. He moved from 10th to 9th, getting his 9th sack of the season yesterday late in the game on Tanner McKee. And of course, Miller's 9 sacks this year was the most on the Commanders for this season. Now, obviously, with all the injuries and stuff like that, if Dorrance Armstrong didn't get injured, he clearly would have led this team in sacks. But, Miller, I think, had a pretty productive season given what the expectations were for him this year. And, he certainly wasn't expecting to be thrusted into a full-time starting role. He was expecting to be more of a true designated pass rusher this year. But, 9 sacks is 9 sacks for a guy his age. That's still pretty impressive. And now he's 9th all-time on the NFL sack list with 138.5 sacks in his career. And then, by the way, he says he wants to come back next year, and he could realistically jump some more spots here. He could get inside close to the top 5 all-time in sacks with another season here in Washington. And, knowing how the people feel about him in the building, I would say there's at least a pretty decent chance that Von Miller gets re-signed next offseason for probably the vet minimum as a rotational pass rusher heading into 2026. So would you bring back Von Miller? Let me know what you guys think down there in the comments section. Give me a yes or a no down there in the comment section. Would you bring back an aging Von Miller as a designated pass rusher for the vet minimum next year? Now, another thing that I kind of noticed yesterday, watching the film is I was really disappointed in Bill Krosky-Merritt's performance. And, 13 carries, just 29 yards, not a great average, obviously, and he had a fumble, no scores. It just, for a season that's had a lot of great performances, he's been the rookie of the week a number of times, and I think he does have a very bright future in this league. I'm not trying to say, give up on Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt because he didn't play great, but, this was a game where you're going up against a lot of backups in the Philadelphia Eagles defense, and, obviously, his production is dependent on how the blocking is up front. He didn't have Sam Cosmi or Laramie Tunsil or Tyler Biadasz in this game, so the Commanders were kind of down bad up front, but Chris Rodriguez Jr. had a much better game in terms of efficiency on the ground compared to Bill. Now, when you look at Bill's rookie stats this year, not bad. Over 800 yards on the ground is a pretty decent season for somebody with just 175 carries. It's a really good average of 4.6 yards per carry, and he got 8 touchdowns. So I think Ja'Cory going into year 2 has some things that he's going to have to develop. He's going to have to become a better pass catcher. He's going to have to be a more reliable pass protector if he wants to play more on third downs. But, he's already an explosive runner and a very efficient runner, and I'm excited to see what he's going to be able to do in the years to come. It's going to be interesting to see what Adam Peters and Dan Quinn decide to do at running back this year, because they could kind of just run it back a little bit and go Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt and Jeremy McNichols and maybe bring back Chris Rodriguez Jr. as well and kind of run it back with this running back room. But they could also maybe make a splash either in the NFL draft or in free agency. If they really want to pair Jaden Daniels up with like a really high-end guy, that would be a lot of fun if there's one that becomes available. So, it'll be interesting to see what this team does at running back, because I really don't know what they're going to do at this position heading into the offseason. But then I thought Jordan McGee, a young player here, has certainly impressed this season. He impressed again against the Eagles. He is just a very impressive athlete, but you can see the wheels turning in terms of his mental processing, which is an underrated aspect of playing inside linebacker in the National Football League. You have to be able to diagnose things, play action, be able to break on footballs, know what the offense is trying to do to you. And McGee is starting to get some of those instincts, and that's really, really exciting because he is an incredible athlete. His sideline-to-sideline speed, his tackling ability, his physicality, all that stuff is super impressive. And heading into next year, there's a pretty decent chance that he might be the green dot for this defense, taking that job over from, of course, Bobby Wagner. But then Jeremy Reeves, I thought he played his heart out, man. I don't necessarily think this team should move forward with him as a starting safety, but I think as a special teams ace and then as a backup safety that you can turn to in the case of your starters getting injured, Revo is about as good as it gets in the National Football League. I think he should actually get extended this offseason for the right price tag, of course, but he's somebody that I want in this locker room. He's a great locker room guy. The players and his teammates love him. The coaches love him. He works his butt off, and he's great on special teams as well, and he's great backup safety. Had a big interceptions before the half yesterday. Kudos to him. But also now moving on to the offensive side of the ball, and Ben Sinnott is somebody that I keep waiting to kind of get his opportunity and play really well and have that breakout performance. And you see it in flashes, and I do think he's got a role on this team moving forward. But is it going to be as the true replacement to Zach Ertz? I don't know if that's actually going to be the case. I kind of feel like with the way that this team has kind of used Sinnott, or kind of lack of that use of Sinnott this year, I think they're probably going to get a true replacement for Zach Ertz to be their new number 1 receiving tight end next year, and Sinnott's going to continue to be the tight end 3 heading into 2026. We'll see what they end up deciding on that, but he had 2 false starts yesterday. Didn't have a great day in terms of production as a receiver either, so we'll have to see on Ben Sinnott. And then when it comes to Mikey Samerstill, another young player from that draft class that was drafted pretty high, I think it's a pretty muddy call for him because it was, it wasn't a good start to the year when he was playing nickel. He's just not a nickel corner in the National Football League, unfortunately, like this team drafted him to be and what we thought he was going to be this year. He's much better on the outside. That much is very clear, but even when he was playing on the outside this year, he wasn't fantastic, all right? So, he would make plays. He's got a nose for the football. He certainly has a knack for that. And because of that, I think, you give him the offseason, the full offseason to train as an outside corner, and then you see what he's got next next year as the number 2 outside corner in this rotation, alongside, of course, Trey Amos, who will be your number 1 corner. But also, like, because Sainristil is a little bit of a risk, I would support bringing back Jonathan Jones or another like really high-end CB3, because if Sainristil stinks next year, you want to have a contingency plan so you can stabilize this position if Sainristil just isn't going to have it in 2026. But I do think with a player that was drafted this high, that has shown some promise as an outside corner, I think you give him another chance in 2026. And what makes that decision easier for me is you do have a bona fide CB1, in my opinion, of the future in Trey Amos, who's going to be able to take on those number 1 assignments, and Sainristil can take on more of those number 2 assignments next year, which I think will do good for him as an NFL player. But then my final takeaway here, and another discussion that we're going to have, and the Commanders are going to have this offseason, is are they going to bring back Jake Moody? He had kind of an embarrassing gaffe yesterday where he missed a chip shot 24-yard field goal. And of course, Commanders Twitter was exploding saying, oh, we got to get a new kicker this offseason because he missed this field goal. But then, he makes a 56-yarder. And, Moody, generally speaking, was pretty decent for the Washington Commanders this year. He only missed 1 field goal, in the few short games and the few short weeks that he was here in Washington. And he did miss an extra point as well. But, he's got a big leg. He was drafted as early as he was drafted for a reason. And obviously Adam Peters likes him. I mean, he helped draft him in San Francisco, and he brought him in, and he was pretty decent for this team this year. So I don't really have a strong opinion either way. If you want to make the case that, Moody has been inconsistent throughout his career, there was a reason why he was available at the point in the season where the Commanders got him this year. Perfectly fair, absolutely. But, I also wouldn't mind if they brought him back for another year, maybe bring in some competition, but, try and figure out this kicker position. And, Moody was the best kicker that this team has had in terms of stability since probably Zane Gonzalez last year during that decent stretch that he had. But Moody's leg is a lot stronger. So my guess is they're going to keep Moody on for another year. They might bring in some competition at some point here, but Moody's going to have every opportunity, in my opinion, to win this job in 2026 because this front office does like him quite a bit. But make sure you guys click that thumbs up icon. We're going to talk about offensive coordinator Kliff Kingsbury and his status as the OC here in Washington in just a second. But, man, it's the last Victory Monday of the season. If you want to help us celebrate, make sure you guys click that thumbs up icon to help today's video and celebrate one last win with us here in 2025 for the Washington Commanders. So now let's talk about Kliff Kingsbury, guys, because there's a big discussion all around Commanders Twitter and, social media, all this different stuff about whether or not the Commanders should fire offensive coordinator Kliff Kingsbury and bring in somebody else to help foster the development of now third-year quarterback Jayden Daniels. This is all sparking from a report from the Athletics' Diana Rossini over the weekend, where she said Washington has also had conversations about potentially moving on from Kliff Kingsbury, even if he doesn't get a head coaching job. Some in the building say there's been a disconnect between Kingsbury and general manager Adam Peters. When was the last time we were watching to see if an offensive coordinator was going to get fired while he was also prepping for head coaching interviews? We'll see how this shakes out. The Commanders likely won't make any final decisions until they see how the broader coaching market develops. So it sounds like the Commanders aren't rushing to make a decision on Kliff, but you guys can take a look at where Washington finishes the 2025 season in terms of their offensive rankings. Obviously, it's not up to snuff based on the expectations that we had for this group coming into the year. But I would also argue that, given what Kliff was kind of given the work with all the injuries and stuff, these are actually pretty decent numbers. I mean, I think most offensive coordinators would have been in the bottom 5 in most of these categories, with what Kliff had to work with this year, with his starting quarterback being out a ton of games and his number one receiver being out a ton of games and, multiple starters missing a bunch of games. Sam Cosmi was out for 8 games this year. Laramie Tunsil missed games at the end of the year. Zach Ertz missed games at the end of the year. Almost everybody on this starting lineup for the Washington Commanders this year had some sort of injury and, very key players at key positions. Jayden Daniels missed, a ton of games this year. Terry McLaurin missed about half the season as well. There's just not a whole lot of offensive coordinators, in my opinion, that would have elevated this team to a top 10 offense, with what went on in Washington this year on the injury front. All right. I just wouldn't move on from Kliff, especially considering what he did with this offense just just a season ago. I really implore you guys to maybe not be, a prisoner of the moment and remember when this team was mostly healthy in 2024. And remember, this was not like a stellar offensive roster, right? This was with a rookie quarterback. They were top 10 in every major offensive category, and this offense led the team to the NFC Championship game, all right? So if you can keep Jaden Daniels and Terry McLaurin and your offensive line healthy next year, and you can add a couple pieces at wide receiver and at running back maybe, and maybe at tight end, I think that this team can get right back to being a top 10 offense next season immediately. And I think this year was a down year for sure, but a lot of that can be linked to the injuries that the Commanders had to deal with all season long. And by the way, a guy that agrees with me on this is Jaden Daniels himself. He said earlier today, I love working with Kliff. Me and him have a special relationship and built that over these past 2 years. I kind of just wish I was out there more to play for him this past year. And I think the reason why Jaden loves working with Kliff so much is because his offense fits his play style perfectly. All right. Yes, it's a lot of shotgun. It's a lot of pistol. Most of the top offenses in the league nowadays are very heavy under center and pure progression style offenses. The Commanders are a little bit different, but with a guy like Jaden Daniels, they can afford to be a little bit different. And in fact, you might make an argument that that's the best thing for Jaden. All right. Like, obviously, you're going from that heavy spread system in college and that kind of air raidy type of system at LSU. And, of course, you have Kliff Kingsbury here that has really helped foster his early development in this league and uses his legs effectively and, gets the ball out of his hands quickly and giving him some easier reads and all these different things. And it's led to, obviously that fantastic first year. And Jaden wasn't quite as good this season, but obviously, he was dealing with injuries. He wasn't practicing a whole ton. I'm really looking forward to seeing what this duo can do in future seasons. I think it would be a massive mistake if Adam Peters and Dan Quinn decide to move on from Kliff Kingsbury at this juncture. Now, if there's a huge rift between Peters and Kliff and they can't work together, that's one thing. But from a pure football perspective, I think it would be a mistake to let go of Kliff Kingsbury. I'd give him at least one more year as the OC here in Washington. But if they do move on from Kliff Kingsbury, my guess is that I would expect Adam Peters to dive into his connections to the Shanahan tree here and try and get somebody to run that style of offense. And that might be where the disconnect is between Peters and Kliff. Kliff wants to run a heavy shotgun and pistol spread style offense, kind of like an air raid system, a little bit more QB friendly in terms of, a young quarterback transitioning from college to pro. And maybe Peters wants a little bit more under center. He wants a little bit more of a prioritization of the run game, that sort of stuff, and kind of run that style of offense that, of course, the 49ers ran when he was the assistant GM there in San Fran. So some names to watch on the OC front if they move on from Kliff. Obviously, the guys in San Francisco, Clay Kubiak, the brother of Clint Kubiak, one of the top offensive minds going up for head coaching positions this year. He'd be a name to consider. Brian Greasy, the quarterback's coach there in San Francisco, helped develop Brock Purdy. Chris Forster, one of the best run game coordinators and offensive line coaches in the league. That would be something to consider. But also Frank Smith, who was the OC for Mike McDaniel in Miami. He's widely regarded as a good OC, but he's never had the opportunity to call plays. Darrell Bevell is also a guy that's got a ton of play calling experience as the QB coach of the Miami Dolphins. Longtime guy that's gotten play calling experience, since the early 2000s. And then you got Mike LaFleur, the current OC of the Los Angeles Rams, currently looking for an opportunity to call plays because obviously Sean McVay calls plays in LA right now. But honestly, guys, I would be a little worried about this scheme change if they decide to make it. I mean, Jaden Daniels has really always been, heavy shotgun, heavy pistol, spread formations, air raid style of offense. And, you make this switch heading into his third year. I'm not saying Jaden is incapable of playing this style of offense. I think he's capable of playing any style of offense, but in terms of getting the most out of him in year 3, I don't know if changing an offensive coordinator and changing the scheme is necessarily the way that you want to go about it this year. As I said, I think that this spread style offense and the heavy shotgun stuff, read option style offense really works with Jaden Daniels' skill set and help get this team, one game away from a Super Bowl in his rookie season. So I don't know if that's something I want to change at this point, but what say you guys? Let me know down there in the comments. Should the Washington Commanders fire Kliff Kingsbury? Give me an F for fire or type K for keep. For me, I am keeping him, but let me know what you guys think down there in the comments. Now, I know today's been a little bit of a longer video, guys, but I do have one more thing that I want to discuss with you guys, which is that now that the season is over and we know exactly where the Commanders rank in terms of their division ranking and all this different stuff, and every other team is slated into where they're slated. We now officially know who the Commanders are playing in 2026. You guys can take a look here. The home teams that you'll be playing at home here at Northwest Stadium, obviously the division rivals, but then also the Seattle Seahawks, the Los Angeles Rams, the Houston Texans, the Indianapolis Colts, the Cincinnati Bengals, and the Atlanta Falcons. And then on the road, again, you have to play your division rivals, but then also the Minnesota Vikings. You go back to US Bank Stadium. Next year, you go to Santa Clara and play the 49ers, Jacksonville, in Duval. Then you've got the Arizona Cardinals and the Tennessee Titans, both of which will have new head coaches next year. So, you get more home games and you get away games, and honestly, some of the away games are very winnable, in my opinion. So, not a bad slate of opponents there, in my opinion, but predict it for me down there in the comments to finish up today's show. Will Washington have over or under 9.5 wins next season? Do they get back to double-digit wins in 2026? Give me an O for over or U for under. For me, I have a lot of confidence in this team, maybe dumbfounded confidence, but I do have confidence in this team. I'm going to take the over on that win total next season. Now, that'll be it for today's edition of the Commanders Report by Chat Sports. Thank you guys for joining me here for our first off-season video of 2026. We got a bunch of great stuff coming up, so if you don't want to miss any of that, click that subscribe button if you haven't already. Till next time, guys, hail to the Commanders.